Okay, guys, thank you so much for tuning back in. I'm really excited about my guest today. I have been following him for a while, and his story is very inspirational to me. And I will say he's not necessarily carnivore, but I'm not necessarily interested in strict carnivore people as much as I am a story that you guys can relate to and just learn from. So. Mike, thank you so much for coming on today and talking with me. Introduce yourself. I know you've got a great Instagram and a really cool podcast. So tell everyone a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I will say first, my allergies are acting up today, so I'm a little cotton mouthed. But so my name is Mike Gorman. A lot of people online know me better as Gormy, and that is kind of a nickname that evolved over time on my Instagram account and eventually became the topic, the title of my Instagram account. On Instagram, I'm Gormy Goes Keto. And so obviously that gives away a big secret, not really a secret, the unhidden secret in terms of like what's a big part of my life and experience. But as you mentioned, I also have a podcast. My podcast is called The Fat Guy Forum. And it's not a keto podcast, which some people get confused about, like because I'm Gormy Goes Keto and I have a podcast, it should be, the rules say it's got to be a keto podcast.
We don't do rules here.
Yeah.
It's all good.
So my podcast is, it's about bringing the stories of like the average everyday man who struggles with weight issues out there. And one of the things I noticed as I started my weight loss journey was that there's so many great resources out there and great people talking and experts talking. And most of the men telling their stories on podcasts and YouTube channels tend to be like athletes that had like a bad off season, or, switched up their diet a little bit and gained 30 pounds. And then all of a sudden found like the secret to massive weight loss because they lost 25 of that 30 pounds, which I don't mean to discount anyone's experience. I'm not saying you have to lose a certain amount of weight or anything along those lines to have a valid experience. But what I was missing was guys that resonated with my experience. My life, at my heaviest was 540 pounds. I lost all of that weight in the late 2010s, like in 2012, 2013. At that point, I guess Gormy Goes Paleo, even though I didn't really have an Instagram or anything then. I followed a paleo style diet and lost over 300 pounds, got down to 210 pounds. It was, I had made it to that finish line. Throughout my entire life, I had struggled with my weight and weight issues, obviously, like was very large as a child. And this was supposed to be, the moment that it all happened. I was turning 40 that year. I hit this goal by my 40th birthday. Things were going great. I went on a vacation and I was fantastic on vacation. I think I had like one off-plan meal at Disneyland and that was it. And that was at the restaurant where it was like $300 a person for our meals. Yeah. It was a little on the, a little on the pricey side there. And then what became very quickly apparent was I had done all this work to make the scale move and done nothing to deal with what was inside my head and, what my relationship with food actually was. I'd spent all this time losing weight and doing it with a specific formula, but never really worked on how food affected me or my emotions or any of those things. And so I fell fast. I fell fast and hard. I was 210 pounds on May 1st, 2013. And October 12th, 2013, I was 480 pounds.
Wow.
Yeah, so I gained 270 pounds in under 6 months. I don't share that to shock people or try to get the Guinness Book to pay attention to the numbers, but to let people know that, because one of the things I think we see a lot in the fitness community is you didn't gain the weight overnight, so you're not going to lose it overnight. Right. And I always then want to raise my hand and go, I kind of did gain it overnight, when I gained it back. But what was very apparent to me, that summer was my food addiction and my relationship with food was still this powerful force that I had done no work on. And I fell right back into it. I describe it as a bender that ended up lasting several years. I had reached a point where I basically resigned myself that I was going to die overweight and there was nothing I could do about it. You know, all those great things we tell ourselves, like there's no way to change. This is how you're supposed
Who
to
I
be.
am, right?
You know, this is who I am. Embrace the identity. And honestly, that's really what I did. Like I really went hardcore into this is who I am. You don't like it, get the heck out of the way. You know, my Instagram account, if you scroll back 3 years on my Instagram, my name wasn't Gormy Goes Keto then, it was Gormandizer, because my last name's Gorman, and the word Gormandizer is to eat voraciously. And I kind of came upon that through a random internet search, and that's really what my life was like. I was putting that 500-pound life on display for people and saying, this is what I'm doing, and if you don't like it, I don't care. You know, I like to describe it now as almost like it was a sideshow attraction. And the funny thing is I have a lot of people who followed me then who still follow me now.
Wow.
And, you know, they can remember, you know, what was there. Or when I mention on like during this interview, I say, you know, scroll back 3 years, I'll get the random DM from someone that was like, you weren't kidding. I scrolled back 3 years on your account and wow, it's a different place. And I'm like, yeah, it's a very different place. So I, in 2017, was still in that high 400 range. My body was starting to break down. I was experiencing all of the symptoms of undiagnosed diabetes, you know, blood sugar swings. I was urinating almost constantly. I was not sleeping. I could not sleep sitting down. I was having to sit up to sleep because, you know, if you look at my before pictures, my neck was at one point 26 inches. Wow. So there was a lot there restricting my breathing. And I knew I had to make a change. But the thing that came up was, you know, and again, I feel like this is like long story answer to a question, but
yeah, no, I love it.
I knew, you know, I ran into a family situation where for the first time ever, because of what was going on, I realized that I owed my life to more than just myself. And I don't mean that to say I decided I had to lose weight for other people. I realized that there were other people in my life that depended on me being alive. And I had decided that I didn't need to be alive, that if I died from eating, I died from eating. At least I died, quote unquote, happy. And, you know, one of the pieces I share, and it's a nice kind of dramatic note, but it also to me is probably one of the saddest parts of my life, was I had written a letter to my family that I used to keep by my bed in an envelope. So if I didn't wake up, they would have some final words from me. It really was basically me trying to convince them not to be that upset that I had died, that I had lived a happy life and nothing they could have done could have changed anything. And, you know, all of those words that we think people want to hear, but really I was just saying it to myself to make myself feel better, you know, at the end of the day. And so when I realized I needed to make some real strong, solid changes, I knew I screwed it up every time I had tried before. You know, I'd like to say that I'm fantastic at losing weight and fantastic at gaining weight, but all the in-between pieces are the pieces of that puzzle that were missing. So I laid it out that, okay, no matter what path you take to do this time, you're going to have to work on your mindset. You're going to have to be conscious of what you're doing, and you're going to have to make choices for reasons and not just make choices because a book tells you to, and not just make choices because that person you're following on YouTube tells you to. So one of the things that I also think happens, especially when you're a larger person, a much larger person who's lost weight before, you stay kind of up on diet culture. You stay up on what people are doing, what they're trying. So now back in 2017, the K word, the keto word, was just starting to come to the forefront for a lot of people. And so I had grabbed a couple books, and it's funny because I bought them just to buy because I kind of had a whim that I might someday read them, but I never picked them up. I never opened them. They were still kind of in an Amazon box closed. And I had this weekend early in 2017 where I decided I needed to do something. So I said, well, let's read those books and let's see what's in there. And in those books, I found some words that I hadn't really heard before. And it was talk of relief from physical cravings for food and feeling a reduction of compulsion. And all I knew at that point was that was something I knew I needed. I needed to have that side of things under control. And so I decided to go keto. And that was early to mid-February of 2017. And I did. I read those books over a Friday and Saturday. I spent all day Sunday cleaning out my house, you know, getting rid of all the food. I'm very much a 0 to 100 person. So it's like you have to either, You don't slowly ease in. And I know some people have to do that. They have to be like, well, this week I'm going to stop drinking soda. Next week I'm going to stop eating bread. I'm like,
I don't get
no.
that. Do not
Yeah,
relate.
for me, even those little pieces just keep everything alive and keep those fires stoked, even if they're just simmering. So for me, it was crates and crates of food that if it was something that wasn't open yet, I kind of put it in the lobby of the house I was living in because I knew people would pick it up. And if it was open, it just went wastefully into the garbage, because I needed to do that, to get myself ready to go. And I started with what most people would call like that lazy keto, dirty keto side of things. I was kind of just tracking net carbs, not really tracking protein and fat. I had that paleo plate kind of ingrained in my mind. So I knew I needed to eat a fair amount of protein and I needed to supplement it with fat so that I wasn't hungry. And that's where I started, up in those high 400s. I went on this kind of, that first year was a bit tumultuous. I was dropping weight really fast. One of those things that tends to happen to the super morbidly obese men out there for the most part. Weight starts to fly off our bodies when we start to reduce the amount of food we're putting into them, to the chagrin of a lot of people around us sometimes. And I did fall off. I had a month where I fell off, but for the first time ever, I came back. And
I saw you post that on Instagram. I think it was just a couple weeks ago.
Yep.
And I really needed to read that day. I love that you fell off for a month in the middle of having already have done this before and got back on. I mean, that's so hard to do. And what was it that made you go back on?
And what it was in the past when I would fall off of a plan, it would just be immediately back into that world of eating, right back into it. And I did for that month. I put on 40 pounds that month. It wasn't like I just put on 10 pounds. Like when people say, I had a bad month, I put on 20 pounds. I'm like, oh, give me 2 days.
40.
Give me a couple days. I'll meet you. What was different was I had made that commitment to be mindful. I had made that commitment to really think about how I was feeling. So because I had started to train those muscles, even if I was trying to ignore it, I was still waking up every day like my stomach ripped up from the food I was eating and my digestion screwed up and feeling no energy and, the desire to go to the gym rapidly fading because everything I had done to take care of myself went away really quickly.
And when you're binging, the last thing you want to do is go to the gym.
Right. So I started to I had that moment and I kind of had this 3 or 4 day period towards the end of that month where I was like, you don't want this life anymore. Okay, you went back and it's not as rosy as your memory paints it. As that voice, I like to say, the demons in my head who were cajoling me to go back there. I realized that the reality of the situation was that was a life of pain and that was a life of not really existing in the world. And I didn't want that to be my life anymore. And so for the first time ever, I pulled everything back in and got right back on. I didn't do any of the, okay, I have to let it be 30 days or it's got to be a full 4 weeks. I didn't have the one more blowout. It literally was the day I made that decision. I was like, we're back at it.
Yeah.
I again purged the house because I had stocked it right back up, purged everything, got back on. And this is one of those things where there's a lot of parallels for me, in my journey, in terms of my connection to the greater world and the universe and higher power and everything, because a few months later I got sick and developed pneumonia. And for the first time in over 25 years, I went to see a doctor. I had always avoided doctors because I knew they were going to tell me I'm diabetic, I have heart problems, I have circulation problems, you need a CPAP, you need these medicines, all of these things that I was terrified of them telling me. But I woke up one day and realized that if I didn't see a doctor, I felt like I was going to die. And not just oh, I feel like I'm going to die, but you can barely breathe. Mm-hmm. Just walking up 2 stairs is too much. Something is wrong. I called my dad, said I needed to go to see a doctor. We, through a long series of events, ended up at an emergency room after seeing a doctor who was get to an emergency room right now. And eventually had kind of the choices taken away from me because I was thrown onto a gurney. My clothes were ripped off. They threw electrodes on me. They started testing my heart. They put oxygen on my face. And it literally felt like I had a hairdryer blasting in my nose to try to get enough oxygen into my body. Because at that point, your pulse oxygen should really be above like 97, 98, and above, up to, 100, obviously it's the maximum. Anything lower than 80 and you're in, there's a chance you're going to die, basically. And I was in that high 70s, low 80s range. So they had me on the highest oxygen possible, had a doctor come in and say, your lungs are filled with pneumonia bacteria. We have to get you immediately on antibiotics. We have to immediately admit you. If you had waited 2 more hours, you probably would have died.
Wow.
And so there I was facing the biggest fear of my life in all of this happening, in the middle of just getting this journey going, a few months before. We're about 9 months into my journey at this point. It was right around nearing Christmas time. And all I could say was, okay, do what you need to do. And I spent 17 days in the hospital, poked, prodded, tested. At one point, we discovered while I was in there, when they were doing testing, that at some point in my life, I had a heart attack and didn't know it and survived it.
Wow.
So it was like all of these, literal miracles in my life adding up, the fact that if I had just decided to wait one more day, I wouldn't have woken up. If I had not been in the hospital, I wouldn't have known all of these things. But the amazing thing, and the reason I bring this up when I tell my weight loss story, is not because the hospital had anything really to do with my weight loss. I did stay keto in the hospital. There's a whole 2-hour discussion there about handling the nutrition department at a hospital when they find out you're low carb and say they're going to give you the diabetic meal. Yeah. And it comes with a blueberry muffin, oatmeal with brown sugar packets, and orange juice.
Yeah.
And I say, no, I'm supposed to have the low carb meal. And they say, well, this is the low carb meal. The regular meal today has all of this plus French toast. And I'm like, oh, this is explaining a lot about how people it was just kind of like insanity. But what happened for me during that time was I realized I was doing the right thing, because I had doctor upon doctor, pulmonologist, cardiologist, literally every one of them said, if you hadn't made the changes that you had made in your life, you would not be surviving this. Wow. Like if your body wasn't as strong as it is right now, you would not be surviving this. And I have to realize at this point, I'm around 100 pounds down. So I'm still a gentleman, above 350 pounds in the hospital. Every new and this is Christmas season, so everyone's taking vacation. You don't have a lot of consistent staffing. So every new nurse, every new doctor that came in would say, so how much oxygen do you use at home?
Oh my gosh.
And I'm like, I don't use any oxygen. Well, do you use a walker or a cane? Because I was bedridden in the hospital from the pneumonia. Like I had to be on oxygen. I couldn't walk to the bathroom. I was bedridden. I'm like, I go to the gym 5 days a week at 4:30 in the morning. And so I actually took some of my before pictures and made it the background on my phone. So when a new doctor would come in, I would just get it ready and be like, this is who I was 6 months ago. And I eventually became known as the keto guy in the hospital. And I would have nurses come in and ask me how to go keto themselves and how to kind of handle being keto when they're like working at, crazy shifts in a hospital. And I also had a lot of Halo Top ice cream stolen from the floor freezer during the holiday season that my sister would sneak in for me. I was blessed to have a family that would bring me food, because in the hospital I was getting basically some lettuce leaves with 3 ounces of chicken. And that was pretty much what they'd be providing me for food almost every meal, because that's all they could figure out to do that didn't have sauces and rolls and all of that on it.
So you were like on a protein sparing modified fast.
Oh yeah, it was I actually started hoarding butter packets. Like every time like breakfast would come out, it's like, oh, can I get extra butter? And they'd hand me some extra ones, and I would take them and hide them in the dresser next to, my bed, because I would sit there with this lettuce and chicken and eat a couple butter packets with it if I knew I was getting some food later, like just to have energy and like be taking care of myself. But I made that commitment that I was going to stay keto in the hospital, and I did that. And what came from that experience was, again, as I start to get to this, I knew I was on the right track. It also really solidified for me that I wanted to live. That I was facing the biggest fear of my life, which is seeing a doctor. And I was a baby about needles for all of my life. I used to faint when I had blood drawn, anything like that. And here I was now having blood drawn 5 or 6 times a day. So it eventually just started to become where I would just put my arms out and be like, where are we going now? Like, this one's all bruised up. Are we going to go to this one? Like, my family would come in and look at my arms. And because I'm very fair skinned, you could see the bruising very easily. And they would be like, what are they doing to you? And I'm like, they wake me up every morning and take blood. Then they come in and they take more blood. And before I go to bed, they take more blood. Like, they're doing all these things. And when I left the hospital, I actually left on New Year's Eve, 2017 into 2018. And I had to go to my parents' house because I couldn't go home because my apartment was on the second floor and I just couldn't walk up 2 flights of stairs. I was still on oxygen. I was bedridden for almost 2 months after that still. So I had made all this progress in the gym and strength wise and saw all of that go away. After you spend more than 30 days in bed, the muscle wasting on your body is pretty intense. So I stayed strict with my eating and kind of kept that all under control and kept losing weight. And doctors, things were great. They loved, the pulmonologists loved seeing what they were seeing. I had a cardiologist for a while because with having had the heart attack before, they were concerned that there could be after effects, even just from the pneumonia. So I had to go for the fun cardiac stress test where they zap you full of stuff and then make you run on a treadmill and everything feels like it's going to explode and you have to jump onto the bed and they put the electrodes on you and like all of this stuff. But what came out of it was I was doing the right things for myself and I was actually making real, impactful change on a body that was dying. And this was also around the time that I discovered the readings of Stoic Philosophy and this idea that you can only control what you can control. And if you spend too much of your energy worrying about things that are outside of your control, that's wasted energy. And, then also that idea, memento mori, we could die anytime. And I used to live like I could die at any time. So every day had to be a party, every day had to be a blast. And what I came to realize was that accepting that you could die at any time means, do you want that last day you live to be remembered as your best day? Do you really want that to be how you're remembered by everyone? And is that what you want to put, the energy you want to put out into the world is just this gluttonous, out of control lifestyle? Or was it up until your last breath, you were fighting for that last breath? And it changed my perspective and it got me more focused. So fast forward a little bit, we went in and, 2018, I saw my weight go from like the 360s after the hospital to the high 200s, breaking out of that magic 300 into the 200 zone. And then I stalled and I stalled hard. And I started to realize that all of the people online saying, just eat following a ketogenic template and the weight will magically drop off and you'll never be hungry again. And any of your food issues are going to be gone and it cures everything. And also if while you're eating a ketogenic meal, you're laying hands on someone who has a cold, it'll cure their cold. And, you won't need glasses anymore. Like everyone claims a lot of things. Yeah, but what I realized was my food issues were so strong that even eating within a ketogenic framework, I was finding ways to out-eat the diet. I was finding, and then when you start to realize that you're binging on ketogenic food, you're binging on high calorie dense, low volume food. So you're even eating more than you probably would be if you were eating cookies and cake, because you're eating jars of nut butter and pounds of steak and, all kinds of things that, I didn't need to be doing. So I, at that point, realized I needed help because I knew I was going to have to start doing some tight tracking and get a better handle on how I was approaching everything. And again, this is another one of those moments where in the past I would have quit and I would have just said, well, the diet didn't work. Keto didn't work. So go back to the way your life was before, it's time to just go back. And instead I said, maybe the way that I'm doing this isn't what's working and I need to find a different way. And I need to find tools to help me. And that's when I ended up connecting with a coach and starting to follow a stricter macros template and went from counting net carbs to total carbs, which is, in my opinion, a game changer. You start to realize the games you play with net carbs, like, oh, wow, I can subtract 30 grams of sugar alcohols and 40 grams of fiber from this cookie and call it a 1-carb cookie. Right. But it's still a cookie, and it's that propensity to replicate the foods that we have no control over with substitutes that just keeps those things going and keeps those cycles burning. So by doing this, I took those off the table literally and found what I consider for the first time in my life, relief. I found that, one of the things we did was, I said I counted total carbs. So this is where I feel like then my journey starts to become carnivore adjacent because I was eating 10 grams total carbs a day.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So 10 grams of total carbs a day versus 0 grams, it's barely any difference.
Yeah, you need like one stem of broccoli.
Right. But then I will say, you become an expert at figuring out, 10 grams of raw baby spinach is a lot of baby spinach, is a giant bowl of, you start to figure out what ways things, carbs become important to you and like what are the things that you want to have and what are the things that you don't want to have and what's it worth and not worth, all those things that we all go through when we look at our eating. And I saw success. I saw, excuse me, what would again be the finish line approaching. And one of the things I said to my coach when I first hired him was, yes, I'm hiring you to help me lose this last 80 pounds, 90 pounds, but I'm more hiring you to help me get ready for what comes next. Because like I said, I'm fantastic at losing weight. I'm fantastic at gaining weight, but I have no idea how to live in that place of not chasing a scale number and maintenance. What does that even mean? So we did a lot of work. We did a lot of kind of work on my mindset and talking about what are the best ways to approach that kind of maintenance life. And I love a little drama, so during all of this time, my Instagram account's gotten a little bit bigger. I've made a lot of great connections, had a lot of amazing experiences within the keto and carnivore communities, KetoCon 2019, life-changing experience, all of those things. And so since I like a little drama, we made the decision that I probably entered quote unquote maintenance the end of October, beginning of November of 2019. And I decided our coaching relationship would end at midnight on December 31st, 2019. So I started being able to say when the ball drops in New York City is when, my coaching with John would drop. He's out the door. And it's funny that people actually think it meant that I was like firing him.
Right.
And, you get into these discussions with people of realizing, well, you do understand the goal of every good coach is to not need you anymore.
Exactly.
Is to get you to that place, you coach someone when they need it.
Right.
And then when they don't need it anymore, you don't just keep taking their money because you could. He very easily could have said, you probably need 2 or 3 more months with me. Like, Let's just make sure you're safe, and use that language that I would have very easily been like, oh, you're probably right.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm not ready to be on my own because as a client on that side of things, I know what it's like to be afraid of new challenges and changes. But I entered into 2020 with this goal of working on what life means to be in maintenance, and a lot of different things have come along with that. Some successes, some failures. COVID obviously has thrown a monkey wrench into a lot of things, life-wise in general for me. But I think the big thing through it all, like the piece that I think, no matter how a person approaches their nutrition, is realizing that if you're not being mindful of why you're doing what you're doing, really having your why in focus and working on that mindset and what are the actual challenges. Because like I used to say I was never an emotional eater. Like I used to say, people would say, are you an emotional, are you a binger? Are you an emotional eater? I'm like, well, I binge, but I don't do it out of emotion.
Right.
And what I actually came to realize now was living in maintenance, how strong my emotions are without food is that crutch. Like I ate to numb myself constantly. And I ate enough so that it was constant. So now my emotions can go all over the place. And it's just something I'm not used to as an adult because I feel like I stunted that growth in a lot of ways. So there's just all these different facets of yourself that you have to really think of it like for lack of a better word, because I know it's got other connotations for some people, is like your journey, you have to take a holistic approach to it. You have to realize that it's not just about changing your plate, but changing how you feel about everything that's going on in your life. And I saw one of your posts this week where you talked about, being in touch with what's right for your body. And I think for me, like that was really the biggest lesson that I came through in all of this. Cause like now people say, are you going to stay keto forever? Like, will you be keto forever? And like, especially people that are not within the health and fitness sphere or are very much in that if it fits your macro side of things,
Yeah.
you know, how are you going to live without cake forever? You know, how can you're never going to have a piece of cake again in your life. And here's how I look at it now. I think there are going to be times in my life where I make choices to eat foods that don't fit that strict template of my dietary way of living.
Mm-hmm.
But because I actually, this is the example I threw out to John when we were working on kind of my maintenance plan and everything. I said, I want to go to, because one of my big plans for 2020 before COVID was I wanted to go to Europe. Now that my body can fit on an airplane transcontinentally, I wanted to go. And I was like, if I go to Paris and I'm in front of the best bakery in Paris and they're selling what is considered to be the best croissant in the world.
There's the croissant diet.
I'm going to, yeah, well, yeah, that's a whole other thing going on right now.
Just
oh, it kills me, but I'm going to have them. Right. But the difference is I don't wake up every day thinking, okay, here's another day that I'm not going to have a croissant or I'm not going to have cake. I wake up every day thinking, if for the rest of my life I never have another piece of cake, I can survive and I can thrive without it. I don't need to have that in my life. I don't need to see that as something that I'm counting down towards or I'm working towards, or I don't see food as that kind of thrill anymore. Like for me, I think the big shift has been seeing food just as entertainment in and of itself, mm-hmm. to now being able to see food as fuel that can be enjoyed. And so I do like what I'm eating and I love the food that I cook and I prepare, but the food isn't the center, isn't the spotlight of every moment of my life anymore. And that for me, when I first started working with my coach, he said, that's what he said he wanted for me. He's like, I want to see you get to a place where you start to see food as fuel that can be enjoyed and not just as the enjoyment itself. And I laughed at him and I said, you're insane. I am never, ever going to see food as fuel. And then probably fast forward 5 or 6 months later, and I'm talking to someone in DMs on Instagram, and the words that I type out are, you need to get to a place in your life where you see food as fuel that can be enjoyed, not as the enjoyment itself. And I hit send on that DM and I was like, this mother,
he's in your head.
He got inside my head and it came from a true place. And I realized, at the end of the day, like that really was it. Like, I like how my body feels eating the way that I eat. So my total carbs have bumped up a little bit, but not by much, because that's just how I feel better. When I'm eating, like I've also played around, and this is what I think goes into like this idea of knowing your body. Like mm-hmm. some people, especially like in the we'll talk in the keto sphere, respond great to a higher fat ratio versus a higher protein ratio. And some people love it the other way. And some people, don't. Some people live in net carb world forever and see great success and never see problems. And some people try to live in that space and follow the accounts that post desserts every day and eat that template and never feel free from cravings, because they don't understand that by making a cake every day, even if it's in a mug,
right,
it's just fueling that for them.
Yeah.
But so for me, I found that my body, work-wise and life-wise, thrives with that higher fat ratio. Mm-hmm. And I recently did an experiment where I played around with protein and amped the protein up, because everyone's like, more protein is going to make things better in the gym and things are going to be better for you if you do that. So I was like, oh, let me try it and see what happens. Take some grams, move it all around, keep my calories the same, but up the protein. And I, after 2 or 3 days, started realizing that my cravings were coming back hard, coming back really hard. And when I switched my ratios back, they went away.
Yeah.
And what I realized was that's what I needed. That's what I need. And there were some people who I'm friends with that didn't like that. They're like, you didn't give it enough time. You didn't try hard enough. And I'm like, why, if I'm in this place of maintenance, should I put myself through hardship with food?
Right.
I don't need to. Like, I'm not failing at the gym. I'm getting stronger. I like what I'm doing. My body moves great. Why? Like, not everything has to be an experiment or a challenge. Right. Not everything has to be there. Like, what I'm really learning this year is that sometimes life can just be life. And that kind of comes full circle for me. Like, when I used to realize that I didn't care about life at all. And now caring about life is so second nature to me that it's moved from beyond just barely surviving to now I want to thrive and I want to say yes to opportunities and I want to talk to every person who says, hey, do you want to talk? And take new things on and take new challenges on. So one of those new challenges, in addition to kind of amping up my podcast, was I've started over the past 2 months working as a one-on-one coach as well with people. I've started taking my experiences, having lost 300 pounds more than once, and starting to work with people on where they're at in their journeys. And, I work with my former coach, Jonathan Shane, AKA the Keto Road. We work together and we, work with people within a ketogenic framework. And it's been a rewarding experience so far. It's like really, it's amazing to see how everyone kind of, like, we all can end up at the same weight, but we all get there differently. And so we all kind of have to get away from there differently at times. And so some things that worked for me aren't going to work for someone else, and some things that are working for someone else aren't going to work for me. And now being a part of that sphere of helping people realize that there's a lot more they can do for themselves than they thought they could do before, because that for me has been probably the biggest lesson of my journey. Is at the end of the day, I didn't need someone to hand me the right plan. I didn't need someone to hand me a workout booklet. I needed me to get up off my butt and do this for myself. And now finding purpose in helping other people see that, it just is really, it's felt, cyclical in a way that is really good for me.
Yeah. So. And the thing is, like, your experience and your story is so extremely powerful that there are just a whole group of people that certain coaches, like you kind of talked about in the very beginning, that maybe have lost 30 pounds or so and streamlined their athletic performance. There's a whole group of people who can't relate to that at all. They're like, I'm morbidly obese. I can't even think about entering a gym. I'm terrified to be seen in a gym. I don't want to be ostracized. I don't want to travel, and they're in that deep depression. They're in that dark place. Mm-hmm. And it's like, you are standing there, like, with your hand out, like, hey, I can understand everything that you're saying. And you have this beautiful, unique ability to help those people. Mm-hmm. And the biggest thing about, because for me, it was always the excuses that would kind of come in. Mm-hmm. And then I would just believe the lies. And then it would lead me back to gaining all the weight back. And so you're kind of in a unique position to call out all that crap. Oh, yeah. Like we talked about, this is just who I am. It's genetics. It's this, you're like, no, let's talk about this.
Well, that's even, obviously I'm not going to give client details away, but right. I was having a discussion with someone the other day and they're doing fantastic. And so one of the things we're doing, is working on, a tightly tracked program just to see how their body responds to what they're eating. And they started saying, well, I've realized that maybe on the weekends I don't want to do that, and I don't want to be so strict all the time, and I want, and I want, and I want, and I want. And I sat there kind of like on the inside being like, okay, let them get it all out. Yeah. And I said, there's something I need to point out. I think everything that you said is really valid and important, and we're going to talk through it all. But before we get there, I want you to realize that you said the word want 7 or 8 times. You never once said the word need. You never once put any of this in terms of what does your body need? What do you need as a person? It was all, I just want this to be this way. Mm-hmm. I said, you've got a long way to go. There are going to be times where there's things you want to do that you don't need to do. Mm-hmm. So let's start to put some of this into some context. And their response was, I didn't even realize that I was doing that, but wow, that makes sense that I'm coming more from a place of want than a place of need. And I'm like, that's important. Like, that's really important. Like, to think about, another person I was talking to this morning who had, not some great reactions to some things going on for themselves. And I said, well, and they said to me, this journey is hard. And I said, it is hard and it's long. The journey is going to be long and hard. So one day that doesn't go the way you want it to go can't be the one thing that derails this long journey, hard journey for you. Like, realize there are good days coming too, and hold on to what happens on those good days, and realize that no matter what you're doing it with purpose, and you're doing it to take care of yourself. So I understand I empathize, I'm a little bit too much of an empath, I think, sometimes with people, not that I feel like I'm overly empathic with clients or anything like that, but I just know that I want to be like, you want to hold someone and say, I was there. I understand that it's a really bad day, but I also then know that if someone had done that for me, that's not going to get me through that moment. It's something they have to come to for themselves.
Yeah.
So again, that also kind of gives me that play there. And I don't mean to, it all to sound like I'm downplaying what other coaches do, because I think people do amazing things. Like, but I've got some good friends that are coaches, and I had one of them say, who he does amazing work with his clients. He's like, I don't know if before you had come to me, if I could have handled you as a client. Like, I don't know if I would have been able to put myself into that experience of being almost 500 pounds and feeling lost. And, there's things I could have helped you with, but having been there, when that person who is 300, 400, 500 pounds is looking for someone who's going to say, I understand that life isn't really that great right now. I know that you're afraid about not waking up tomorrow. I know what that means. So let's start getting you moving towards feeling better when you wake up in the morning. And let's start doing things that are going to move you forward. So it is a unique, I think, perspective. And it's one that I hope will kind of be well received by people in the long run, and realize that, because there's also that little part of me that's like, someone's going to say, why should I work with you as a coach? You've got a history of spectacular failures as well as successes.
But you put that with someone, the human side.
And that's what I think it is. Like, I think it really is about like being able to say, like, I can speak to that for you because I have been that person that fell off so many times, and that person that gave up on themselves. And I know what it means to not give up on myself now. Like, I really know what it means to realize that I'm worth fighting for. And I think that's what everyone has to come through. Like, there's a difference between needing to lose like 10, 15 pounds for a wedding or something along those lines, and having to tackle this burden that you've carried on your back literally for decades. And, getting there is not always going to be easy and fun, but seeing someone get there, I think will probably be also one of the more rewarding things I'm ever able to do.
Absolutely. And one of the things you mentioned was the whole feelings aspect. And I know for myself, I never used food as fuel my whole life. It was always to numb out, parents getting divorced, separating, people in my life leaving, traumas, it was like food was my best friend, and it was always there for me. And it wasn't until, in my part of my story is the last time I lost 100 pounds was 10 years ago, 11 years ago. And I switched to drinking and became an alcoholic, and have been in recovery for that for many years now. But that experience was what kind of cued me to how I used food to blunt out my feelings. And then I just switched right over to drinking, and it's the same damn thing, and learning how to be what I call emotionally sober. And managing those really hard feelings. And I think that that's what people have the most difficulty to when they get to maintenance, because it's like, you're kind of, when you're on a weight loss journey, you're chugging along, you're doing the deal, like, okay, I'm seeing success, I'm having, you're getting that feedback constantly of success, but then you hit your goal and it's like, okay, now what,
Right.
and then you have the bad day, and then it's like, how do you cope with those really strong feelings? And, talk about that in your journey a little bit here, because I think that's what really trips people up the most on any kind of weight loss journey at all.
Oh, I think you're 100% right. I think it's like you don't realize even how much of a coping mechanism that food becomes. And then you're taking that mechanism away, and you're having to find another way to cope and to live and to feel those feelings. And I had during a live I did the other day, someone asked the question, do you think that you've replaced one form of food obsession with another form of food obsession now, in terms of like being keto versus just being a blanket overeater? And one of the things that kind of came to me when I thought about that was that there's these addictive pathways and these parts of our personalities that in a lot of ways have protected us for a long time. Like we
Yes.
used it to protect ourselves.
Yes.
Whether we were doing it in a healthy way or not, clearly is debatable,
Yeah.
but it still was something that we used to protect ourselves. And so now if I have moments where I feel like obsessed with knowing the macros of a food or an ingredient or what my plate's going to look like or something along those lines, the end result of that obsession is a satisfied, healthy body, not low energy, not blood sugar swings, not mood issues, not any of that. And do I think that people can turn obsession with healthy food into a problem? Obviously, we all know that orthorexia is a real thing and that kind of obsession. But I think what it comes down to is, are you using that obsession, in a way that is still not, contributing to your whole being? Or is it in some ways you're now funneling like those skills, you built
Yeah.
to create positivity and create good feelings and create a sense of satisfaction and growth and really awareness of who you are as a person and what that means. And I think for me, like that's where that goes. And so now, like, well, talk about an example of emotions in handling it. Like, one of the things that happened to me early during the COVID quarantine was within a 24-hour period, I lost both of my jobs and found out that I could possibly lose where I'm living. And my grandmother went in the hospital, but because with restrictions, no one's allowed to visit her, no one's allowed to do anything. And so there I was, literally feeling the floor drop out from under me. And so I turned to food. I turned to food in a bad way for a few days. And I realized I was just making myself feel sick and it wasn't good. And it was just a negative response. And I got right back on and, deal with those consequences. But what it showed to me was that there is never a cure. There's never this place that you reach where everything is 100% perfect forever. That it always does come back down to choosing how we're going to react to situations. And I chose poorly. And it's funny because I talked to some of my friends after it happened. They're like, why didn't you call me right when you felt like you were going to do that?
Why would I do that?
I said, you would have stopped me.
Right.
You would have talked me out of it. You would have said, what the heck are you doing? I'm like, and the addict inside of me did not want to be stopped. Like that's the deviousness, of that reality. And I think at the end of the day, like it has to come down to being okay with knowing that for me as someone that was 540 pounds, I'm never going to quote unquote have a normal relationship with food. Like I'm just never going to be in that, most likely never going to be in that place where I can look at food and one day go to a party and eat all X, Y, and Z, and then the next day be right back where I need to be without thought, without preparation, and without kind of conscious awareness. Because for me, it comes down to like it really is an addiction issue. So I need that consciousness. I need to keep that mindful side of me alive. So no matter what choices I'm making, because I also don't use the language of cheat. Like I don't think cheating, because at what point did cheating become a good thing? The only realm where cheating is a good thing is on your diet, because people want to ask you, how soon can I have a cheat meal? How soon can I have a cheat day? Like I now look at every food choice I make as a choice, and there's consequences, and there's going to be consequences to those choices. And I have to know that if I'm making a choice, I'm choosing those consequences. And then, so there's no eating off plan, waking up feeling like crap the next day and being like, dang that pizza I ate last night. It's making me feel sick today. No, I ate that pizza, and that's what's making me feel sick today.
Right.
I did this. I put that into place. And I know for some people, they think that that's just a semantic trick. It's just a trick of words. But I think it goes more to framing experience and framing it within your head and making a choice about what the perspective you want to have on all those different pieces. And I think it's really empowering to be able to get to a place where you say, I'm going to not choose to do this today because I know how it's going to make me feel, or I am choosing to do this and I know how it's going to make me feel. Like that keeps responsibility within yourself, which isn't something you have to beat yourself up about. It's something that you can take that as something that's really powerful, I think, and really can be something that, gives you more strength to make the right choices. Because when I abdicate control of my choices to someone else because I follow the printed meal plan they give me or something along those lines, I don't have to take any responsibility for what happens, good, bad, or indifferent. But when I'm making all of my choices, good, bad, and indifferent, I'm responsible for what comes next. And I have to control my reaction. And I have to feel more empowered as a person moving forward with my life to know where it's going to take me and be okay with that and be okay with the good days and be okay with the bad days and realize that when you stack up more wins than losses, you're still winning.
100%. I love that. And so much wisdom in what you've said. I mean, just this whole conversation is like, I want little sound bites that I can just keep and just listen to, because I think so many people are going to be able to relate to what you're saying, and that it's not just, you know, I feel the same way with the food. It's like, I would love to be able to just have, you know, days where I eat whatever I want and not have to have any consequences. But I've kind of proven to myself time and time again that it could set me off for a couple of weeks or a month or a year, you know, and it's like, you just have to get to that place where you're like, okay, I'm going to make the choice, and to stop demoralizing it, saying that you're good or you're bad for doing it, because it just goes along with the whole diet culture thing of like, you know, being a bad person if you're overweight. I mean, that's just absolutely ridiculous, and having people feel ashamed for just living and breathing, you know, it's ridiculous.
I completely agree. And one of the things that's come up for me a lot lately is like, I've realized that for me, I had to move away from seeing food as good or evil. You know, any food is good or evil. Now, I will say that with a caveat, because whenever I say that on social media, someone will be like, so you're telling me that Oreos and Fruity Pebbles are good food? And it's like, no. What I'm saying is things that are actually food are not good or evil. There's a whole lot of things we put in our mouths that are not food.
They're not food.
They're not food. They are not food. So if something is not a food, I'm not talking about it. But if we're talking about, you know, carnivore versus vegan, or, you know, because those are some extremes where people are keto versus Weight Watch, whatever, realizing that by giving food personality traits and, you know, almost animating it with it's got good intent and bad intent, and it's evil and that's good and that's bad, you're giving yourself permission to beat yourself up. You're giving yourself permission to then see yourself as good and evil, instead of just realizing choices are choices. And if you make a choice that doesn't move you forward, and that's how I think of choice, does it move me forward to where I want to go, or does it move me backward? Well, if it moves me backward, it just means I need to do some extra work to keep moving forward. If it moves me forward, keep making that choice, and realize that every moment is full of choices. You know, there isn't a bad day. There's like a bad moment. And then you choose how you respond.
Turn it into a bad day. Yeah. And on that same token, like the whole shame cycle, you know, I'm a bad person because I ate this food and it was bad. And you go into that shame spiral, and then you're binging again. I mean, that's where it is for me. I have to be, as a person in recovery, I have to be very mindful of what's going on in my head, because it's always something up here where I don't feel right. That's going to lead me to eat something that's going to not make me feel good, so that I can continue that bad feeling that started here and then just spiral on out, you know, until the cycle stops, you know.
That shame spiral is an enabling behavior for yourself. Like, it's because I'm a bad person, so I deserve to be punished with food
and feel bad.
But it's that addiction inside of us going like, ooh, we've been bad, so we're gonna get access to what we want. Like, you know, they're like, again, like why you often don't confess those things happening is because you don't want people to know that it's happening. It's not, it's, at the end of the day, it's not that you're so ashamed of it. It's just, it's knowing that it might stop it, you know.
And that's like, as somebody who helps other people, you know, now that I'm in recovery for alcohol as well, I try to sponsor other people and help other people when, you know, they're struggling. And it's like they'll call me the next day after they decided to drink. And I'm like, I get it. You're driving in your car to the liquor store. You're already feeling better.
Right.
You haven't taken that drink yet. and you're already feeling better. And food's the
Yep.
same way. Like you start driving to the Dairy Queen and you're like, I'm not calling anybody, forget
Right.
it. You know, this it's on.
Right.
'Cause you're already feeling better. Once you've already made the decision in your head,
Oh yeah.
you're feeling better. And but is, you know, for me, as soon as I eat that thing, or if I was to drink, I would feel immediately horrible.
Yep.
I mean, there would be like a couple seconds of enjoyment and then just
I
despair.
know.
Like, oh man, why did I do that to myself? Like, this is not helpful. And now I just feel worse, you
For
know?
sure. For
So
sure.
learning how to recognize, you know, those feelings
Hmm.
before it turns into behavior, I think is part of, you know, recovery, food, alcohol, whatever. You know, it's all the same. It's all the exact same. It really is. Just one's a little bit more deadly than the
Hmm.
other, but they're both still very deadly. Is the thing.
I had someone on my podcast a couple weeks ago who he was a food addict, but also a hard drug addict, cocaine specifically. And while we're in the middle of talking, because he kept talking about his, recovery program for food and his recovery program for drugs. And one of the things that I just said in the middle of it was the person who's attending each of those meetings is the same person.
Right.
These addictions are coming from the same place. And for him, he hadn't even necessarily even had that moment of perspective yet. And he's like, I hadn't even really thought about that because in his head, he had built it up was the cocaine addict and the food addict.
It's the
Instead of
same.
realizing that they're the same addict, so
Yeah.
they're driving each other in some ways. So it,
And
it,
the
it really
addictions
is.
are both serving the same purpose.
Right, right.
You know, it's just the numbing out of the feelings and the not participating in life and the isolation
Mm-hmm.
and the blunting out of pain. I mean, it's literally all the same thing.
For sure.
So you could just do one recovery meeting instead of two. I just do one,
Mm.
you know, save time. Yeah. Well, one thing I did want to ask you before we close out is,
Yep.
you know, just this whole COVID thing. You mentioned in the conversation earlier that you did struggle in the beginning, but how have
Yep.
you navigated? I think this is a very difficult time for people that have struggled with addiction,
Mhm.
period. So how have you navigated the COVID?
I
Um,
think the biggest thing, because like I had my perfect routine built. I get up every morning at 3:30. I was at the gym at 4:30. I went to the office. I ate my food at a certain time. I left the office. I went to my next place to hang out, whether that was a coffee shop or with friends or wherever that was, and I wasn't around food. I had my life and my routine built.
yeah,
I had my daily Stoic reader that I picked up in the morning and my devotional and my journal and all of that. And I let that all go out the window because it all went away in a lot of ways. So what I did was I sat there and realized the impact of routine, the impact of maintaining routine, even if it wasn't going to be the same routine, even if I couldn't go to the same coffee shop at the same time or do all of those things, I had to start saying to myself, you're going to put a routine back into place. So we're going to start setting an alarm. Like I went a couple weeks without setting an alarm to get up, and I was staying up to all hours of the night and sleeping in and like all of that. And I finally was like, no, you're going to set an alarm to get up, and you're going to get up and you're going to go for a walk, and you're going to go for that walk. Then you're going to come back and you're going to have your coffee. And that's when you're going to do your reading and your journaling. And then you're going to set up time to work on something. And I decided, there were some editing skills with my podcast I wanted to build on. So you're going to start doing some searching to find some YouTube videos and different resources. And I brought routine back, even though it wasn't the same routine. And I think there was something really important there for me that then, because this is something I think is, I talk about even with some of my clients, like I am a firm believer that just talking weight loss, not overall health, but weight loss is really more about food than it's about anything else. It's not about how much exercise, how many calories you're burning exercising. It's about what you're actually putting into your body that's going to have the biggest impact on your weight loss. But that said, having a well-established workout routine makes having a well-established food routine easier. And so I think putting that daily routine back into place allowed me to rein in the things other areas that I allowed to get out of control. It allowed me to see the importance of regularity and the importance of bringing that into my life and how it was becoming almost more important because so much was out of my control. So much was chaotic and so much was you don't know what's going to happen the next day. Is there going to be toilet paper at the store? Is there going to be the same meat you want to get access to? All of those things. So I had to pull in and think about what are the actual things I could control those things. And for now, let go of the things that I can't control. Is my job coming back or not? I had to let go of worry about that. I had to, let go of, where that's going to go and realize that I'm still alive and I'm still breathing. So I have another day to try to find a new opportunity. And I just think that reintroduction of routine was a game changer for me.
Yeah. Wow, and so much of what you're saying, I'm like, oh, it's serenity prayer.
Mm.
Just
Oh yeah.
control the things you can and
Right.
let go of the rest, because that unnecessary worry and
Yep.
fear is going to lead you back into a dark place that, my coping mechanism is the food, and
Yep.
that's what we have to really, I think, stay cognizant of, is like, how much worry am I giving this particular thing that I have zero control over? And if I allow that to continue to do that, it's going to eat me up inside so much that it's going to make me walk back to that thing that I
Mhm.
know will work temporarily,
Right.
but,
Exactly.
not
Exactly.
really, but that's just that's just how it works, in my
Hmm.
opinion, for anyone who has addiction issues. So
Completely agree.
awesome. Well, cool. Where can people find you if they want to
Sure.
work with you, et cetera, et cetera?
Sure. Well, if you are interested in coaching, right now you can find me at theketoroad.com/coach-Mike, and that's where all the coaching information is. Or if you just want to talk about it and don't really want to go through with that kind of commitment yet, obviously you can also find me on social media. On Instagram, I'm Gormy_goes_keto. On Twitter, I'm Gormy Goes Keto, no underscores or anything like that. And then if you are interested in the podcast, the Fat Guy Forum, it's on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, which is just really weird that people can listen to my voice on iHeartRadio. But pretty much every pod platform out there, you can find the Fat Guy Forum. We actually literally just this past week hit the 1 year anniversary mark on the podcast. So
Congratulations.
I was very excited about that. It took me a year to launch the first episode. So now I'm like, okay, we're 86. I'm editing episode 86 today. So I'm just really excited to watch that continue to grow. And if anyone wants to talk, it's funny, literally right before we were talking, I was talking with John, and next week we're doing a 0 carb carnivore week, for each of us, just
Cool.
kind of like, it's something where I've been playing around. I've played around with carnivore at different times and had varying degrees of success, and some things I really love and some things that I don't really love. And I've been thinking about doing it again just for a week, because it can be fun to play with how you're approaching your nutrition sometimes. And so he's like, I'm thinking about doing this. And I'm like, I was just thinking about doing that. So, and then
Cool.
I'm like, and I'm talking to the carnivore yogi today. So, it's the universe saying to me, yeah, take your 7 days and see how that goes.
Heck
So,
yeah, get your fats in. I'm like,
oh yeah.
I do a high fat carnivore. So
Mm,
I'm like beef suet, butter,
oh yeah.
moderate protein. I don't do high protein like a lot of people, because I'm like you. I just do so much better with a high fat like diet. It just, for my brain, for my body, everything feels better. So
I'm a duck fat fan. I'm a duck fat
oh yeah, I
fan.
haven't tried duck fat. I'm
Oh,
a
it's
beef suet is my spirit
mm,
animal.
understood, understood. What I like is because duck fat doesn't solidify as much as some other animal fats, so you can kind of get away with making like an aioli or a mayonnaise with it,
Oh,
and that's one of the joys in my life. Um, I also have a couple jars. Every time I make sugar-free bacon, I save that fat, so I've
oh
got
yeah.
a fair amount of pastured bacon fat lying around too. So I'm fully stocked. So it
Fats.
wasn't, and I actually I have a meat delivery, from a meat company that I haven't tried before, like, arriving in the next 2 days. I'm like, so I'm gonna have a fully stocked freezer. I got everything I need. Just have to, get to the farmer's market and grab some duck eggs and some chicken eggs and get
Nice.
myself rolling.
The stars are aligning. I love it.
No, exactly. It's serendipity at play.
It is. Absolutely. Well, this has been really, really awesome. And I can't wait to share this with everyone. I know it's going to help a lot of people. I'll make sure I link everything below the video, so you guys watching, you can go and follow if you're not already, and make sure you check out the podcast. So I will link all of that below. But thanks again for coming on and chatting with me today.
Well, thanks, Sarah. Thank you so much for having me on, and it was a great, opportunity to reach a new audience and talk to some new people. So I just really appreciate your time.